Have you ever heard someone say that when you have little kids, you don't actually take vacations? You take just trips. Honestly, I used to relate to that so much because it felt so true. When our boys were little, vacations were wonderful, but they definitely weren't relaxing. Packing alone felt like preparing for a military operation. It wasn't just clothes. It was beach toys, snacks, sunscreen, towels, the extra outfits, the favorite stuffies, medications, the nebulizer. And somehow I felt like I was always forgetting something. And then we'd get there and we'd be making special meals for the kids, cleaning up after everyone, hauling everything to and from the beach every single day, trying to keep everyone happy while somehow enjoying yourself too. And don't get me wrong, I cherish those memories. I would go back and hold those little boys on the beach in a heartbeat. But I also remember thinking, this is a lot of work. When I was young, I used to love to sit and read on the beach. There was no way during any of those trips that I could even consider bringing a book. There was no reading and relaxing on the beach. This year, though, this trip we just got back from, something felt different. And it was different. And it wasn't because the vacation itself was different. We went on the same vacation we have gone on since 2020 with our close friends. And we still had the same house. And it was a house full of people. Like I'm talking 9 kids and a bunch of adults. We still spent every day at the beach. There were still sandy towels and wet swimsuits and dishes and garbage and, teenagers with hormones and attitudes and plenty of moments that weren't picture perfect. But somehow along the way, I realized that something had changed. For the first time in a long time, it actually felt like we were all sharing the responsibility of making this vacation enjoyable, not just the adults. And as I reflected on it afterwards, I realized that this vacation was actually the payoff from all of those little life skills that we've been teaching the boys over the years. So if you listened to last week's episode about summer life skills, today's episode is really the sequel. Today, I want to share what happened, what surprised me, and why I think teaching our kids responsibility doesn't just prepare them for adulthood, but it blesses our families right now. Feeling stretched thin, constantly busy, yet wondering if there's more to life than simply getting through the day? Maybe you've lost sight of who you are beneath all of the responsibilities. Maybe your faith feels rushed, your dreams have been sitting on a shelf, and you're craving more peace, purpose, and direction. Friend, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Anchored with Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Wilkinson, a Catholic wife, mom, author, speaker, and coach, passionate about helping women reconnect with God, live with greater intention, and confidently step into the purpose that He has for you. Each week, you'll hear honest conversations, inspiring stories, practical encouragement, and faith-filled wisdom to help you deepen your relationship with God, strengthen what matters most, and pursue the dreams that God has placed on your heart. Whether you're navigating a season of transition, searching for clarity, or simply longing to feel more anchored in your everyday life, you'll find encouragement and community here. So whether you're unloading the dishwasher, sitting in the school pickup line, or out for a morning walk, or checking off one more thing on your to-do list, know that you're not alone. Take a deep breath, grab your coffee, and let's spend the next few minutes getting anchored with purpose together. Let's grow in faith, live with purpose, and become the women God has created us to be. Welcome to Anchored with Purpose. Before we even got to go on the vacation, God was already teaching me something. So this is the first time that my husband wasn't able to go on this trip. He just couldn't take the time off, which meant that I had to be the one to drive our little family there. And friend, I don't know if you got to listen to the episode where I talked about some of my car trauma and some of my anxieties about driving. I'll just give you the tiny background, but I had some severe car trauma as a kid. And then just a few years ago, had some major spiritual warfare where I was completely disoriented while driving. And so I had to go through some therapy and a lot of work to be able to even drive on a highway again. not to mention a long trip. So there was so much going into this that I have to say, like, I had to put a lot of faith and trust in God. In fact, the morning before we left in my quiet prayer time, I said, God, I'm just going to trust you and I need you to help me pick out the right route to help me get there. And instead of being stressed about it, I looked at the routes that came up and I felt called to this one route that thankfully didn't have any big scary bridges on it. And that drive was just one that was not difficult for me to do. And so, God also led me through the ride home, which was interesting because I had picked out that drive where I wasn't going to have to do the big scary bridge. And the funny thing was, God didn't avoid the big scary bridge for the way home. He showed me that he was going to be there with me through it. So instead of avoiding it, God helped me pray through it. What was really interesting was when we got to this big scary bridge and I realized, no, I'm going to have to drive it. I tapped Andrew, who was in the front seat. Sean was in the back. I was like, all right, boys, come on, we're praying. And I first just said a vocal prayer. I don't even remember all of the words. And then together we said an Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, and a Glory Be. And next thing I knew, we were over the bridge. So even though God doesn't always remove that scary bridge, he reminds us that we don't have to cross it alone. Another part preparing for this trip that was so different from years past. My kids have been packing for themselves for years. I typically give them a packing list and they can check things off. What was funny about this trip is when I had offered them both packing lists, at first they were both like, no, thanks, Mom. We got this. We know what we need to do. And Sean had actually come up to me afterwards and said, you know what? I wouldn't mind a packing list if you could please print one. So I printed one for him. They both packed up their own stuff. I had just had my shoulder surgery a week before, so I was unable to lift heavy things or like reach up to get boogie boards down from the rafters in the garage. So what was great is that Sean and one of his buddies, another friend who was on the trip with all of us, helped to get those things down. They helped to pack the back of my Jeep, which was just great. The kids contributing to the trip before we even left. And so that was a huge help and took a lot of stress off before the trip. Now, I have to share with you this one conversation that really changed the whole week. So the friends that we go on this trip with, it is a couple, they're close friends of ours. We've been friends since Andrew and their oldest were babies, and these kids are 14 now. And it was a whole crew of us who have been friends since our oldest were babies. And they treat everybody to this trip every year. They go for 2 weeks and anybody can kind of come and go. And it's really a beautiful and gracious and wonderful thing that they do for all of us. And my friend's husband had said, at the beginning of this trip, kids, I want you to know we all work very hard on this trip. Like we do, your parents do. And we want you to remember that this is a vacation, not just for you, but for your parents too. So just help us out. Clean up after yourselves. Think about your parents being able to enjoy this vacation as well. And I have to say that stuck out to me big time because it really was just something I hadn't thought about, like giving the kids some responsibility on the trip too, just like we do at home. And we work hard to make this a great trip for all of them. And I have to say that conversation stuck with the kids too. In fact, the first night that we were there, as we were planning, we let the kids order takeout. My kids, of course, didn't want the takeout. We just made like mac and cheese for them. What was funny was that this is one of the things that I love about trips and vacations and travel is that kids try different things. And you've heard me talk before, my kids can be picky eaters. Well, while Andrew was waiting for the mac and cheese to be made, he tried one of his buddies' fried shrimp. Andrew doesn't eat much, right? Especially not anything like meat. He tried it and loved it. So this was huge for us. So he got to have some, which was great. I made the mac and cheese and the parents were getting ready to go out. And as we were on our way out the door, I said, hey guys, you know what? Like I just want to reiterate, what Mr. Sullivan had said. And I want to share that we trust you guys. You guys are amazing kids. What would be great is if you all cleaned up after yourselves and, just like had the dining room table clear and like took care of any mess you guys made before we get back from dinner. And here's what was the most incredible thing. We came home and that house was spotless. I'm talking about cleaner than when we left it. These kids not only cleaned up after themselves, Andrew had wiped the stove down. The other kids had taken care of all of the dishes. Some kids had wiped down the counters. One of the kids had vacuumed. I mean, we didn't even ask that. We weren't expecting it, but it was just such a blessing. And I don't even think I've ever come home from dinner on a vacation to a cleaner house than when I left. But it was really just such an incredible thing that they all pitched in and helped. And these kids were ranging in age from 15 to 8, all kids that are responsible, good kids. So it was just such a lovely thing coming back from that. And we just got to continue on with our night, watching the sunset from the back deck. We weren't coming back from dinner and cleaning up after the kids, which was just great. Now, the next day after the beach, I had took some of the girls on the trip out to run a couple of errands. I had asked Andrew to make mac and cheese for himself and any of the other kids that wanted it to go along with dinner that night. And he was proud of himself that he knew how to make it. I let some other adults know, hey, Andrew's going to be making this. He didn't want help. He wanted to show that he could do all of this on his own, which I think was pretty adorable that he wanted to do this on his own. He probably should have accepted a little bit of help, but he was able to figure it out. And sometimes it's important to let the kids struggle just a little bit and learn through that because they get so much growth through that. Now, one of the things that is typically, just a constant on a trip like this with a lot of people and a lot of kids is just keeping up with everything in the kitchen. Normally, it's the parents unloading the dishwasher, wiping down the counters, and doing all of that regular stuff, taking out the garbage. And this year, what was so nice was that all of the kids pitched in for this. And did we have to prompt them? Yes. We had said, oh, guys, dishwasher's done. Can a few of you please unload it? It was great. We were able to get it done quickly so that way we could just continue on with our day. Same thing with wiping down counters and emptying the garbages. We would just ask, hey, can you take out the garbage, please? Hey, can you put a clean bag in? And it was wonderful because everybody was pitching in and the whole trip didn't feel like it was on our shoulders as the adults. We got to enjoy the time with our kids without feeling stressed or frustrated that they were all just hanging. We all pitched in, which was great. One of the things that's important to me before going to bed anytime is to wake up to a clean kitchen and a clean space. So before bed, some of the nights, some of the kids would pitch in and help just wipe down the counters, making sure everything was clean, making sure there were no dishes in the sink. And I would prep the coffee for the next day. So that way we could all just wake up to a peaceful space. That way we wouldn't have to get dishes out of the way before getting breakfast going, and we wouldn't have to worry about the coffee. It was all ready, and it just made our days more peaceful and off to a better start. Something else that we did this year that was a little different was we gave the kids more freedom. Something we had never allowed them to do was walk into town before. And when I say town, I use that term very loosely. There is like a candy store, there's a little restaurant, there's a couple of little gift shops and boutiques, and that's about it. Oh, and there's an arcade. There's not much there, but we gave them more independence and more trust, and they relished in it. They loved it. They loved that, a group of them could say, hey, can we run down and go to the candy store? Yep. As long as you stick together, go ahead. Take your phones. That way we can track you. We're good. It was great. Another thing that we did to give them a little bit more space and independence, this is a house where we have, 9 kids and a bunch of adults. So space is something that there wasn't a lot of. There's not enough room for every kid to have their own room, or even like for all of the kids to a lot of the kids had to share rooms. And so the boys, it worked out great. One of my friends brought a tent and we let the older boys set it up. And this was what was interesting. As they were setting it up, there were so many life lessons happening. They had to figure out how to set up a tent. And they kept asking, hey, will you help us with this? Nope, you guys figure it out. We know you know how to follow instructions. The beautiful thing was it really had them working on some problem solving skills. And guess what? They figured it out on their own. They realized that one of their poles was broken and that they would need a repair kit. Rather than coming to one of us and saying, hey, what should we do? They figured it out. They found out that they needed a repair kit. They found where they could get one and how much it was. And then they asked an adult, hey, can you please help us get this repair kit? Guys, had we jumped in and figured it out for them, they never would have had to learn those skills that are going to help them later in life. It was great. When they got the kit, they were able to set up the tent on their own. It was just such a great life skill for them. And then it gave the boys their own space, which was really nice. Especially in a house full of kids, it was great for them to have their own room. So, my kids weren't sharing a room with me. The other boy who was on the trip didn't have to share a room with his mom. It was great. They got to go out there. They could watch movies in the tent before bed, and it really worked out so well for them. Another thing that felt really different this year was money. So typically, like when we would go into town or when we'd go to our favorite little beach town that's a few towns away, we would just pay for certain things. We would, tell each kid like, hey, you were gonna, you can get, one thing for $20 or this, we would give them that budget, but then we'd have to be present for each transaction. What worked out nicely this time with us giving them a little more freedom and autonomy was we just put money right on their Greenlight cards for them. So the first time that Andrew walked into town with some of the big kids, I put $20 on his Greenlight card for, if he wanted to get snacks or ice cream. What he ended up getting was a new pair of sunglasses and then gave his other sunglasses to his friend, which I thought was just so kind and generous. Did he actually need new sunglasses? Probably not, but I love where his heart was at, where he bought new ones and then gave them to his friend. Another time when we went to that beach town a few towns away, it was really interesting because, we let Andrew and his friend kind of go off and shop and get some things. And I would get an alert on my watch every single time that Andrew made a transaction. And it was cool because, I didn't have to be there for every transaction. I wasn't there judging what he was buying. It let him kind of, again, have that autonomy to make some of those decisions. And that I think was a real growth opportunity for him as well. And for Sean, it was sweet. At first, he didn't want to spend anything until he found one of his favorite kind of stuffies. And we talked about how it's vacation. It's okay to spend a little bit. This is why I gave it to you. And he did end up buying it, which it was sweet because then he used it and snuggled it the rest of the trip. Another time when the boys got to be thoughtful with their money was I gave them money on their Greenlight cards for the arcade. And normally it's my husband standing at the arcade machine for the loading up the cards and all of that. This time I just put $20 on each of their cards and I said, okay, you get $20. That's your max for the arcade. Go ahead, do with it what you want. And Andrew right away went and put like $10 on and then another $10 as he was trying to earn all of these tickets. He was like playing this game where you could earn these boxes and it like showed the ticket amounts. I mean, I have this fun picture of him with like a huge stack of these boxes of tickets. And at first, Sean was like, well, I don't really want to play at the arcade. I don't even want the money. I'm going to give it back to you. And I had said, honey, this is like, I gave you this money. This is for you to do what you want with. So you could spend it, you could invest it, you could put it in your savings. It's really up to you. So he and I had this really beautiful moment where we sat on a bench together while the other kids were playing in the arcade. And we were looking on the Greenlight app at some of these videos about investing. And it really was incredible. We both learned so much from these quick little 90-second videos on the Greenlight app. And I was impressed at what we were learning. And it was really sweet just to see how, he wanted to be more mindful with his money, which is great. And I think so mature. So while we were doing this, Andrew was off earning more tickets and went up to the prize thing to cash in. And he came back down with this giant plastic fake sword and he surprised us all. He gave it to Sean, which I just thought was so kind and so generous. I wasn't there managing everything that he was doing, and I wasn't micromanaging what he picked out because in the past, I'll admit, I have done that before. And it was just really beautiful to see how those two were learning about stewardship and generosity and making decisions and being content with what they had. It really was just some great life lessons in there. Now, I'm sharing all of these great lessons and these great things that we learned on this trip. And I don't want you to get me wrong. It wasn't perfect. The kids weren't perfect. We weren't perfect. Nobody was perfect, right? There were still reminders. Well, so we had to continue to remind them, hey, don't forget to, fill up your water bottle. Don't forget to pack your lunch for the beach. Don't forget to hang up your beach towel when we get back. There were still arguments over the shower. And, there were 3 showers for all of us people. And the kids' favorite thing this trip for some reason was, I call for shower. So we had to have conversations about that. We had to have conversations about everybody pitching in for beach cleanup. We had to have conversations about attitudes because we had teens and preteens and sometimes they just can't control some of those attitudes and feelings that they get, but we had to have some kind conversations about those. And we know that, it's not going to be perfect and our kids aren't going to be perfect. And that's okay because growth isn't perfection, but it really was beautiful seeing the growth that these kids were making on this trip and the progress that they were making. It was really incredible to see that day that we came home from dinner, how the older kids were really just so proud of themselves for helping to keep an eye on the younger kids, for coordinating the house cleanup, for, setting up the tent. It was just really cool. Another thing we really focused on this trip was about limiting devices. We didn't eliminate them. We still let them have their phones and we let Andrew bring his laptop, but we wanted to limit those so that they could be present for conversations. They could be present for some time at the beach. They could play some games. They could engage and really have these, one-on-one conversations rather than being glued to their phones with their AirPods in. And it was really nice because we did get to get some great walks and some time like walking down to the surf at sunset and seeing the high tide come in, which was really fun. And, typically we would kind of let the kids have free reign. And rather than doing that, we got to help them unlock some core memories of, just being present and spending some time together. Now, I want to share with you how we had some faith moments along the way as well. So I have shared with you how I pray the Rosary every day, and I typically use Hallow when I pray it. It just helps me along. It helps me meditate on mysteries. And so on the drive-in, probably about an hour and a half into it, I played the Rosary. The kids were kind of like one AirPod in, couldn't really tell if they were sleeping or not. So I put the Rosary on and I prayed right along with it while I was driving. And then afterwards, I put on The Power of the Rosary audiobook. It's by Gabriel Castillo, and it is such an incredible book about the Rosary. I've learned so much about it. This is my second time listening to it, but I really wanted to listen to it again, and a long road trip is the right time to listen to it. So the boys were there, one AirPod in. They probably weren't fully listening, but I'm hoping that some of those seeds were planted, that they were able to hear at least a few nuggets that will carry them into adulthood in their faith. Some parts of the book that maybe stuck out to them that they'll remember. And my prayer for them is that they start feeling this call towards praying the Rosary. And by me praying it in the car with Hallow, it's modeling that behavior for them that, this is what we do. We pray the Rosary. And by letting them listen to this book, even if they weren't fully paying attention, they were getting some of that wisdom about the Rosary, and they were getting to hear some of the gifts that come from praying the Rosary and really just the power that comes from it. And, as parents, we don't always know which seeds are going to take root. Our job is to continue planting them and then watering them. So as I reflect on this vacation, I keep coming back to this one thought. On last week's episode, I shared about teaching our kids life skills over the summer. And I talked about laundry and cooking and chores and budgeting and giving them more responsibility. And Honestly, I really thought those things were mostly about preparing them for adulthood, preparing them for college, preparing for them for, one day to have families of their own. But this vacation reminded me that those lessons don't just benefit their future. They're blessing our families today. Every time, those kids cleaned up the kitchen without being asked, every time they thoughtfully considered how to spend their money, each time one of the kids, even if it wasn't mine, pitched in to help unload the dishwasher, or they carried beach gear, or they solved a problem instead of asking an adult to fix it. The whole family benefited and the whole group benefited. The atmosphere in the house was really different this year because the adults weren't carrying everything. Everyone shared in making this vacation enjoyable. And, isn't that really what we're trying to do as parents? We're not raising children who simply know how to do chores. We're raising adults who notice needs, who are contributors instead of consumers, who think about other people, who understand generosity and solve problems and take ownership and really know how to serve. And isn't that exactly what Jesus modeled for us? I keep thinking back about some of these faith moments on the trip too. Praying together as a family before that bridge that I was so afraid to cross and thinking about how good it felt afterwards, not just to cross it, but that we prayed through it together as a family, listening to the Rosary together in the car and praying along with it, playing the book about the Rosary, even when I wasn't sure how much the boys were listening. And as parents, we spend so much time wondering, is any of this even working? Are they hearing us? Are they learning? Are those prayers making a difference? Are the conversations sinking in? And the truth is, we often don't get immediate answers. Parenting really is an act of faith, and we plant seeds every single day through our words, through our example, through the responsibilities that we give them, through the prayers we pray with them and for them, through the faith that we live out in front of them. And then we trust God to grow what we can't see yet. So if you're listening today with toddlers or little kids or teenagers who still roll their eyes sometimes, don't lose heart, friend. Keep teaching. Keep inviting them to help. Keep giving them responsibility. Keep praying with them and for them. Keep trusting God with the seeds that you're planting. Because one day you'll look around your vacation house after dinner and you'll notice that someone else cleaned the kitchen. Someone emptied the garbage. Someone made dinner. Someone blessed their sibling before thinking of themselves. And you'll realize that those little lessons you've been teaching all along were taking root. Not just in preparing them for someday, but in shaping the family you're becoming today. Friend, thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If this episode encouraged you, I'd love for you to share it with another mom who's in the thick of raising kids. And if you missed last week's episode on summer life skills, go back and give that one a listen, because this vacation was really the beautiful fruit of everything we talked about there. And it felt like a vacation, not just a trip. Until next time, my friend, keep your heart anchored in Christ. Keep dreaming with Him. And remember that sometimes the smallest seeds we plant today become the greatest blessings we'll experience tomorrow. Stay anchored with purpose. Friend, thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If today's episode encouraged you, challenged you, or reminded you that you're not alone, would you do me a favor? Share it with a friend who could use a little encouragement too. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow the podcast and leave a review. This helps more women discover the show and become anchored with what matters most. For more faith-filled encouragement, free resources, and tools to help you live with purpose and intention, visit anchoredwithpurpose.com. And as you head back into your day, my prayer is that you walk away feeling encouraged, inspired, and a little more anchored in God's purpose for your life. Until next time, my friend, keep seeking God, keep showing up for what matters most, and keep pursuing the life He created you to live. Stay anchored with purpose.